Hello, my name is Marlena Pegolo. In an effort to address the developmental needs of young children and ultimately inspire neighborliness, Fred Rogers broke barriers of existing norms in television. Hello everyone, and welcome back to NBC's feature segment, Barrier Makers and Barrier Breakers. I'm your host, Emily Winters, and today we're going to be talking about someone who may surprise you as being a barrier breaker. He took a powerful stance on the nourishment of young children and families, serving them through television with his counterculture style and messages of care. Clad in a red cardigan and sneakers, you guessed it, the iconic children's television host, Mr. Rogers. So, what kinds of barriers did Mr. Rogers have to break in order to bring his mission to life? Well, the norms surrounding television at the time were barriers that negatively influenced children's emotional development. Fred Rogers stepped in and broke these barriers by providing an alternative show that would help and did help with the growth of children's mental health. As put by Alexandre C. Claren, the author of several analyses on Fred Rogers, quote, Fred Rogers created a program that spoke to the affective and educational needs of young children and people of all ages during a period of social, political, and cultural upheaval and technological change in the U.S. So, let's transition to setting the mood of the 1960s, a turbulent time filled with conflict, protesting, segregation, disruptive movements, and assassination. Divorce rate would grow and continually increase over time. Fear and unrest were spread across the nation. Also during this time period, there was great technological change. By the end of the 1960s, 95% of homes in America owned a television. Along with the rise of this new technology came the rise of norms surrounding television culture. These norms were barriers for children's mental health, and because the messages that were being portrayed were detrimental. First, children's shows were often flashy and fast-paced, overwhelming young minds. Children were bombarded with and confused by images that blended fantasy and reality, all too much for their systems to process. Many shows were slapstick, vaudevillian, demeaning of others, and according to the National Institute of Mental Health, 80% of all children's shows contain some sort of act of violence. Kids also bore witness to violence through watching the news. A researcher for the American Psychology Association found that by the time a child leaves elementary school, they would have seen 8,000 murders and more than 100,000 acts of violence through television programming. To make matters worse, parents frequently used television as a babysitter and left children to their own devices, literally, for hours on end. With no adult monitoring what a child was watching, the adult was essentially sanctioning all of the inappropriate and toxic messages viewed on the screen by children. A 1975 study done by Lynette Friedrich-Rufer, a professor at the University of New Mexico, found that children learn from these behaviors. It observed that children who regularly watch children's shows shows a decrease in patience and an increase in anxiety, fear, boredom, and disrespect. At such a young age, these children are likely to grow up with these adverse emotional habits. In conclusion, we have the inadvertent parent approval, the overwhelming shows, and the exposure to violence through the TV and news that were thwarting children's optimal emotional development. Fred Rogers was not in agreement with many of these norms, but was both angered and inspired to provide children with quality programming. Longtime staff member Hedda Sherapin reflects that the reason he went into television was because he hated it. Fred realized, however, the potential of reaching a widespread audience through this medium, and so adjusted his plan of becoming a Presbyterian minister after college to the idea of ministering to children and families through the vehicle of television. Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood first aired at the WQED studio in Pittsburgh in 1968. Right off the bat, it combated many of the norms surrounding television. Instead of providing violent shows like the news, Mr. Rogers established a safe, secure, trusted environment on his neighborhood and gave children methods to manage their feelings that would aid in emotional development. He assumed a parental role and discussed issues on his program and encouraged families to do so at home as well. These issues range from everyday topics such as the fear of going to the doctor or going down the drain in the bathtub to more serious, mature issues like divorce, assassination, mistakes, bullying, war, and death. No one else was doing this on television. He lived by his mentor Martha McFarland saying that, quote, anything that is mentionable is manageable. He validated the child's feelings and provided non-violent outlets to manage them, whether it be pounding some clay if they're upset or playing their feelings on an instrument. Fred creatively incorporated these life lessons through song and dialogue between the deep and symbolic relationships between puppets and humans. Instead of providing slapstick or overwhelming content, Fred Rogers strove to achieve the highest standards of programming possible. He spent multiple hours on a single script, perfecting every deliberate detail, and spoke in a calm, gentle, slow manner. Although not all shows at the time were considered slapstick and did contain some educational value like Sesame Street, these shows were focused on cognitive learning, were fast-paced, and had multiple themes in one show, whereas Mr. Rogers had one theme per one episode. When talking about the contrast between emotional and cognitive educational programming, Mr. Rogers once said, quote, "What really matters is whether he uses the alphabet for the declaration of war or the description of a sunrise, his numbers for the final count at Buchenwald or the specifics of a brand new bridge." In an effort to model positive interactions, Mr. Rogers invited guests on the show of all different backgrounds, beliefs, and ethnicities to love what they do in front of children and show their rich, diverse capabilities and talents, a proven method of inspiring children to want to learn and develop. Some guests include cellist Yo-Yo Ma, environmentalist Sylvia Earle, actress Rita Moreno, and trumpeter Wynton Marsalis. These guests often modeled how they used their talents to express and manage their emotions. One specific guest was a boy named Jeff Erlanger, who appeared in a 1981 episode. Jeff had a spinal tumor and had spent most of his life in a wheelchair. This was groundbreaking in television and made what could seem uncomfortable for children and families into a simple interaction between Jeff and Mr. Rogers, reminding us that we are all more alike than we think. Another iconic guest appearance was with the neighborhood police officer, Officer Clements. The scene shows the two of them in a kiddie pool cooling their feet and sharing a towel to dry them off. At the time, segregation was prevalent and it was unheard of to have a Caucasian and an African American in a pool together. Fred was making a loud statement in a gentle manner and helping kids emotionally to have acceptance of all people. Fred Rogers had an immediate impact on the children he serviced through their behaviors. The same 1975 study done by Friedrich Kover observed that children who watched Mr. Rogers showed an increase in things like self-control, increased persistence, ability to express feelings, sympathy, help for others, and concentration. By manifesting real love and providing a consistent expression of care every day to children while they're still young, they grow up to make choices driven by love and for the benefit of the world. Adults feel like they're part of something bigger, and their contribution to society creates thriving communities, and ultimately, they treat one another with neighborliness. If everyone did this, that is essentially world peace. Author of biography The Good Neighbor, Maxwell King, said that, quote, "He is a powerful cultural avatar in an age that seems sick with rage and conflict. Whether it is the overwhelming pace of change, the baffling complexity of communications technology, the disruptive force of a globalizing economy, or the rise of populist political anger, Fred Rogers offers a counterpoint." But in the end, it wasn't just about children. Fred Rogers provided exemplary moral guidance for everyone. He strove to let others know that they are loved, can love others, can love themselves, and can live together in peace and harmony. And for a while, it felt like we were straying further from these concepts with political unrest, school shootings, and denial of climate change. But with the novel COVID-19 outbreak, things have changed. It took us a global pandemic to realize what's important in life: helping others, reaching out to our friends and families, making connections with our elders, being neighborly. Mr. Rogers has resurfaced once again in time of peril because his messages are eternal. They are the root of all religions, decisions, human rights, life. So, I encourage you during these trying times to speak these 5 words to someone else. They are simple but deep. They have the power to shatter any barrier, no matter how strong. Won't you be my neighbor? Thank you.